Good evening and welcome to the Nebraska Sierra Club Fall Fundraising Event, celebrating victories and meeting challenges. I'm Brittany Cooper, Chair of the Nebraska Sierra Club, and we're thrilled to be joined this evening by a great lineup of speakers, both live and pre-recorded. Throughout the evening, you will have an opportunity to bid on dozens of items and experiences from our online silent auction, shop for the holidays, or just for yourself, and know you're supporting an important cause. Bidding will close at 9 p.m. tonight, so make sure you get those bids in. Funds raised from this auction will support the Nebraska Sierra Club's critical environmental advocacy for a healthier future. You'll find the link in the chat. And just a quick update, our longtime treasurer, Clyde Anderson, is in the hospital with some health concerns. We just want to offer our best wishes and prayers for a speedy recovery. Thank you for all you do, Clyde. I'll now turn it over to Mike Semrad with Red Rebel Media. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brittany. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Good evening, everybody. How are you? My name is Mike Semrad with Red Rebel Media here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it's my pleasure to be here. What an incredible organization. And I've been familiar for a long time, and this is fantastic. And it's my honor to introduce Bill McKibben. So if you've never seen Bill speak, he is unbelievable, by the way. I've had the luxury of hearing him speak, and it just blew me away. But I'll tell you a little bit about him. In 1988, so he wrote The End of Nature. It's a book for a common audience about global warming. So he's also the co-founder and senior advisor of 350.org, the first planet-wide grassroots climate change movement, which has organized 20,000 rallies around the world. Wow. Helped lead the resistance to the Keystone XL pipeline and launched the fastest growing fossil fuel divestment movement. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill McKibben.
Hello, friends. This is Bill McKibben. What a pleasure to be, at least in the virtual Cornhusker state. I'm not with you because the Glasgow Climate Conference is underway, and I won't try and pretend that it's solving all the world's problems, but it's interesting and powerful gathering of people anyway. And I'll do my best to give you a little sense of it in a minute. First, though, main thing is just to say such congratulations on another year, and on a year when we can all celebrate some remarkable victories. Chief among them, of course, the fact that after 10 years of relentless effort from everyone, the Keystone Pipeline is not going to be built. There's not going to be that scar across the state of Nebraska. And it's not going to be built in large part because Nebraskans have done such a good job coming out against it. Farmers, ranchers, indigenous people, environmentalists of all kinds. And of course, the club has played a big role in all of that. I remember when we were doing 10 years and 3 months ago, maybe, the first big series of arrests in Washington, D.C. at the start of these protests over the Keystone Pipeline. And the first thing was that no one thought we had the slightest chance. The National Journal, which is kind of the trade paper for Washington, Pauls, had polled its 300 energy insiders on the Hill and on K Street. And they had said 91% of them said that TransCanada, as we knew it in those days, would have its permit for this pipeline by the end of 2011. But then people went to jail in record numbers. 1,254 of us in that first big 2-week demonstration. And it was remarkable to see how many people from the Midwest made their way out to the White House in order to do that work. It was the biggest civil disobedience action about anything in a very long time. And the big green environmental groups joined in a big way from the start. And I remember talking early on with Mike Brune and with other club leaders, and they were a complete and wonderful help right from the start. But But I remember Mike saying, but the charter of the Sierra Club won't let us go do civil disobedience or nonviolent direct action. It's not allowed. And I remember saying, well, maybe this should be the occasion for that to change. And by gum, Mike Brune took that back to San Francisco and did the work of making it change. And one of my proud memories is a year or two later, again at the White House, again about Keystone, ending up in the same paddy wagon, not only with Mike Brune, but with Julian Bond, hero of the early civil rights movement. And that was an important moment for him, for the club, and for the fight against the fossil fuel industry. So I want to just say extraordinary thanks. So many of my friends there in Nebraska have done so much, chief among them, of course, the irrepressible and wonderful Jane Klebb. But so many people have played such a role in all of this, and none of us could have done it without all the others pitching in all our different ways. And so just extraordinary thanks. And let me say that defeat was by no means the last for the fossil fuel industry. In fact, Keystone demonstrated to people that it was possible to stand up to big oil. They lost, which is something they'd never done before. And they lost early on. It took till this year to finish the victory. But by the end of 2011, when Obama had postponed their permit approval, it was pretty clear that we had their number. And so people went on to do extraordinary things, to fight everything you can imagine. Nothing gets built for free anymore. There's a kind of Keystone tax on absolutely everything. And we win a lot of those fights. We've banned fracking in New York and half a dozen other states. We've beaten all 6 proposed coal ports for the Pacific Northwest so that coal in the Powder River Basin can't get out to Asia. Lots more pipelines have gone down, and it's been remarkable to see. But of course, the battle is very far from over too, as we saw this year when oil started flowing through Line 3 up in Minnesota, which drove me crazy because it's an absolute Keystone doppelganger. Same size pipe, same stuff flowing through it. And it's 10 years later when we know that much more about the climate crisis. But the fossil fuel industry remains strong and powerful, and that's the thing I want to talk about, just to remind you where we are in this climate fight. I wrote the first book about climate change 32 years ago now. It came out. And we knew what was going to happen. And then we just sat, some of us, in kind of horror over the years watching it play out, because we couldn't get traction because the fossil fuel companies erected this enormous architecture of deceit and denial and disinformation that kept us locked for 30 years in a completely sterile debate about whether or not global warming was real. That's a debate we now know from great investigative reporting that they knew the truth about back in the 1980s, but they were more than willing to lie, and that lie cost us extraordinary amounts of time. We've emitted more carbon as a species since I wrote that book than in all of human history before. And that's why we're now in such a fix. It's why the temperature is rising so fast. It's why we see these dramatic and horrible manifestations day after day after day, the firestorms, the floods, on and on and on. So far, we've raised the temperature 1 degree Celsius. Our current path, business as usual, takes us to at least 3 degrees Celsius, 5, 6 Fahrenheit by the end of the century. If that happens, we're not going to have civilizations like the ones we're used to. It's just too much violent, dramatic change. The UN estimates it could produce 1 billion climate refugees. Try to imagine that world. The economists say the damages would be on the order of $551 trillion, which is more money than currently exists on planet Earth. Can't let it happen. Obviously, what's going on in Glasgow right now is an attempt to drive it down to 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. And it is the greatest fight that humans have ever engaged in, and one that we desperately need to win as best we can. We can't stop global warming. We may be able to stop it short of the point where it actually overwhelms our civilizations. But if we're going to do that, it's going to take all of us pushing hard, because the fossil fuel industry remains much too strong. Witness the work of Joe Manchin over these last weeks to derail the clean energy pricing plan that was a key part of our efforts to reduce emissions. He took more money from the fossil fuel industry than any other person in Washington over the last few years. And boy, did they get their money's worth. The return on investment was extremely high. Biden and his team are fighting hard to get as much done as they can, but it clearly isn't going to be enough. We're going to have to keep pushing. And one of the places we're going to push is on our political system, but obviously that's going to be hard for a while. The legislative window may be closing in DC. So that's why it's incredibly important that you guys are so well organized in Lincoln, and to push hard on the state's Public Utilities Commission, on the legislature, to get some of that work done. But it's also why we have to push hard on the other lever of power that's big enough to matter, and that's the financial system, the banks, the asset managers, and so on, that supply the money that lets the fossil fuel industry do its thing. I've been working on this for quite a while. This divestment campaign that we helped launch is about 10 years old. And we celebrated earlier this fall the fact that we'd gone over the $40 trillion mark in endowments and portfolios that have divested. That's the biggest anti-corporate campaign in history, and it's really having an effect. In fact, someone handed me a story earlier this morning explaining that the cost of capital for big fossil fuel energy projects was now on the order of 20% because of divestment and all the unwillingness of many investors to go down any further that dirty route. That 20% compared with 3 to 5% cost of money for renewables, and that is very good news. But we can push this much harder, and we must. The big banks remain huge funders. Banks like, say, Chase Bank lent $1/3 trillion to the fossil fuel industry since the Paris Climate Accords. They did not need Donald Trump to sabotage it. They were willing to do it themselves. So that's why, we're pushing hard. And when I say we need everyone. We need wonderful groups like the Sierra Club that are at the heart of the tradition of the environmental movement. We need these remarkable young people. It's the best part about being in Glasgow, is seeing all the incredible work that all the many Gretas around the world are accomplishing. And frankly, we need old people, which is why we're starting this third act thing aimed at people over the age of 60. So much of the money ended up in our hands. And since we vote in such large numbers, our political power is so great that it's going to be very hard to get change done unless we can get people of our generation to act hard. The conventional wisdom is that people become more conservative as they age, but I think that need not apply to those of us reaching those milestones now. We're of a particular era. Our first act was actually filled with interesting political and social cultural transformation. We participated in or bore witness to the Civil Rights Act, the women's beginning of the women's movement, the first Earth Day. And now in our third act, we need to summon some of that spirit back up again, or else we're going to be leaving the planet a worse place than we found it by a large margin, which is not the legacy that any of us of a certain age hope for. So we're eager to collaborate in all kinds of ways going forward. We have things that are working in our favor. The remarkable fall in the price of renewable energy over the last decade, to the point where it is the cheapest way to generate power on planet Earth, is the first real break we've caught in the course of this climate fight. And we have to make all that we can of it, and fast. And that means Well, that means figuring out how to put up renewable energy at as fast a pace as possible, how to outfit it with the batteries that make it work all the time. And it means also electrifying as much of our lives as we possibly can, from our cars and buses to the ways that we heat and cool our homes to the ways that we cook our food. This is a huge transformation to have to make in a short period of time. Vested interest is always in the way. The fossil fuel industry tries at every turn to slow down and delay things in the hope of keeping their business model alive for a little while. But we're also at the point where inertia is an enormous problem too. And it's going to take a lot of work of all of us to do the kind of execution that needs to happen. But we're capable of it. Think of what we've accomplished just in the last few years. With the Sierra Club in the lead, we've shut down plans for hundreds of coal-fired power plants in this country, and now we're moving on to do the same work of beyond gas. And that should give us great hope. People said these things were impossible, but nothing is impossible if we rise up in large enough numbers. So that's what it's going to take. And I don't need to tell you guys this, but here's the word to spread to everybody else. The planet is outside its comfort zone, so we need to be outside ours. We need to be doing even more than we've been doing, and even harder. And I have no doubt we will, or at least that we will try. And that as we try, it will be the greatest, most global movement that the world has ever seen, which is good because it's the greatest and most global problem we've ever come up against. I'm not going to tell you how it's going to come out because we don't know. It's a timed test, and that's the thing that makes climate change so difficult and so different. Unlike all the other political issues that we face all the time, if we don't solve it soon, then we will not solve it. We don't have it with us forever to kick around. Once the Arctic's melted, nobody's got a good way to freeze it back up again. And that means we should take very seriously what the scientists told us a year or two ago, that we have to cut emissions in half by 2030. That is a huge, daunting prospect, but it's not one that we get to compromise on, because in the end, our fight's not with, industry, or it's not between Republicans and Democrats or Americans and Chinese. All of those factor in, but the real fight's between human beings and physics. And physics is immature, refuses to compromise, doesn't negotiate, just does what it wants to do. So we've got to respect its limits, and that's what we're about. This year was very powerful. This year was very powerful because of the work that you all did, especially around Keystone. And let me tell you that message came through loud and clear here in Glasgow, where people are paying real attention. Let's hope we have many more victories. We will if we push for them, and we will look forward immensely to celebrating them together. Thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you, Bill. Wow, incredible words, incredible words. Thank you so much. What a treat to have you on tonight. Fantastic. Well, let's move on with the program. And my next guest, I'm very excited to introduce. He's a friend of mine, and we were talking about it earlier that I've never actually introduced him before. So this is a very, very fine treat for myself. As we all know, Ken Winston is a man of many hats. Literally, he wears hats, and he wears good hats. And that's a thing everybody can remember about him. He's very tall, and he wears great hats. So let's get into who Ken really is, though. Ken is obviously, he's currently a community organizer for the Nebraska Sierra Club. He represented the chapter as a policy advocate before the legislature for 14 years. He led the chapter's opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline, because I know that because I was right there with him. Fantastic voice he had. First as an organizer and later as an attorney in the proceedings before the Public Service Commission and Nebraska Supreme Court. He was part of the Beyond Coal campaign's successful effort to retire the North Omaha coal plant. He is also currently the Policy and Outreach Director for the Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. Also, he is the parent of 3 incredible children and grandparent to 1 absolutely adorable grandchild. He also plays guitar, which I know. I've played with him before. He's an incredible musician and has one of the greatest local dances that you'll ever see. If you ever see him out and about, he's one of the greatest dancers on the dance floor, and you can't miss him. He also sings in the choir at church with a fantastic low bass voice and loves to go running with his dog and post incredible short stories about it that we all adore. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my treat to introduce my friend, Ken Winston. All right, Ken, just unmute your mic and you're ready to go.
Thanks, Mike.
There
Thanks
you go.
for the great introduction. Well, I hope I deserve all the wonderful things that you said about me. And actually, they're mostly true. Well, actually, they're all true. So, I mean, I do all those things. Well, it's an incredible honor to be able to speak after Bill McKibben, and I want to just echo some of the things that Bill said. The victory on the Keystone XL pipeline victory was a huge victory, and it's really, and as he indicated, it was a big victory because of the fact that we were told repeatedly that we had no chance. And if you looked at it logistically, if you did the math, you would have said, well, these environmentalists don't have a chance because of the fact that they had all the money from the financial interests of the fossil fuel industry, which is trillions of dollars. They had the support of the entire Republican Party, and they had lots of other political connections. It just looked like there was no chance for the people who were opposing it, particularly when you consider that we were just a bunch of environmentalists. We were ranchers and farmers. We were indigenous people, grandmothers, students. So we weren't given a chance at all, but we did. We won. We won the battle. And I want to talk a little bit about the important role that the Nebraska chapter of the Sierra Club had played in all of this. And of course, why was it such a big deal? Well, the pipeline would have increased greenhouse gas emissions. It would have threatened our Ogallala aquifer, and it would have infringed on the rights of indigenous people and also on the rights of landowners. So the chapter did a lot of things on lots of levels. We empowered people, we organized rallies, we testified at hearings, we engaged in litigation, and we kept showing up. And that is a really big deal, because this battle went on for 11 years, and we kept showing up time after time after time, and that was a key part in all of this. So this was a victory of people power over money power. It was a victory for everyone who wrote a letter, testified, demonstrated, stood in line, or took a stand in any way involved in this. It was truly a victory of spirit, heart, and mind. It was a victory for the earth and for people everywhere, particularly for people on the front lines. So I played a lot of different roles. I was an organizer. I went out and drove up to north central Nebraska, went to and visited with people and helped hear their stories, help them realize their stories mattered. I was also a policy advocate before the Nebraska legislature. And then later on, as Mike indicated, I represented the chapter and Bold, Nebraska before the Public Service Commission and in the Nebraska Supreme Court. I wanted to recognize some people who were involved in this, and the chapter provided some great leadership in this. The fact that we had steadfast leaders who said, we're going to stand with the people who are opposing this, and that includes people like Dick Boyd, who was the chapter chair, Candy Bless, who became chapter chair after Dick, David Corbin, who's going to receive an award later on tonight. And also, I also want to recognize current chapter chair, Brittany Cooper, because she did a lot of work behind the scenes that I don't think anybody ever recognized. And so I think that needs to be recognized. There were also countless volunteers. I'm going to name a few people like Jane Wilson, Pat Fuller, John Pollock, and there's countless others. I mean, if I don't call your name, it's not because you're not appreciated. It's just I don't have your name right off the top of my head, but please know that if you came to a rally, if you wrote a letter, if you spoke and testified at a hearing, if you wrote a letter, any of those kinds of things, all of that was appreciated. All of it made a difference, and that made the difference in stopping this pipeline. Now, there's one specific thing that I want to talk about that the chapter did where we really played an absolutely key role. And that in the summer of 2011, Senator Ken Haar, who was also a member of the Chapter XCOM at that time, led a call for a special session of the legislature to establish siting legislation related to the Keystone XL pipeline. And at that time, once again, this was one of those deals where we were told we had no chance. I mean, I literally remember people laughing in my face because they said, you don't really think you're going to get a special session of the legislature. And it was really a long shot. But the bottom line is we got a special session of the legislature. And the other thing was, once the session was called, a lot of people thought that we weren't going to get any siting legislation. In the middle of the special session, there was a rally in Washington where 15,000 people showed up, and we made a circle around the White House. And then in the middle of that, President Obama made some statements about things happening in Nebraska. And lo and behold, we ended up getting siting legislation passed. And that siting legislation was a key later on when, Obama denied the permit in 2015, but when Trump revived it in 2017, it was a key to have that siting legislation because that meant that TransCanada couldn't just go build the pipeline. They had to go through a process. And the Sierra Club was engaged in that process before the Public Service Commission. And because of that process, that led to an appeal. It also led to a change in the route, which created more issues on the federal level. And that ended up allowing the process to be delayed until Biden took office in this year, and the permit was denied. So it was really a big deal. And thank you to everybody who was involved in stopping the Keystone XL pipeline. And I know Mike and one of the things I always say is the TransCanada had the money and they may have had the politicians, but we had the artists and the musicians and the poets. And I know that the concert that Mike and so many musicians performed at up on Art Tandrup's farm and the CD they recorded, all those kinds of creative things that people did made a big difference in all of this. So let me talk about some other victories. I don't want to take up all the time here. Last year, we advocated before the Lincoln Electric System to get them to set a 2040 decarbonization goal. This is the most ambitious goal in the region. For more than a year, LES told us they didn't need to set goals for decarbonization, but we kept showing up, and the fact that the Sierra Club got engaged helped tip the tide and show support for progressive board members, and they set this goal last November. Then there's the Lincoln Climate Action Plan. This is a progressive, multifaceted plan that addresses many sectors that will be impacted by climate change. It combines examination of threats such as extreme weather events with areas of opportunity such as clean energy development. It includes consideration of environmental justice issues, impacts on low-income and minority communities, and it also talks about things like local food and natural climate solutions. So it isn't just about energy. It includes transportation. It includes every facet of society. It provides a template for other climate action plans, and we're working to support inclusion of the provisions of this in the comprehensive plan update in Lancaster County. Now, one of our other victories was stopping a Costco chicken factory in Northwest Lancaster County. And this is a project that Chapter Chair Brittany Cooper and Blue Stem Chair Melissa Baker were heavily involved with. They set up these What the Cluck events, and it was really gratifying to see that the Lancaster County District Judge Nelson ruled in favor of denying that permit. That's sort of a nonsense. Well, that's not. Anyway, she said the permit, it was appropriate for the county board to deny the permit, and she upheld that ruling. Now, what are some plans for the future? And I'm going to just briefly touch on a variety of different things. As Bill McKibben said, there's so many areas that we need to be working in. One is the Omaha Climate Action Plan. They've just recently announced that Omaha is going to be developing a climate action plan. That's an area where we need to engage. I plan to be working with Missouri Valley Group members. There's also other organizations that like OTOC and Nebraskans for Peace that we plan to engage with. And we would support inclusion of health impacts and impacts on low-income and minority communities, which often are not included. Oftentimes they just talk about energy issues or energy and transportation issues and don't include all of those other aspects. We're going to be working to support the NPBD decarbonization goal. NPBD is currently considering setting a decarbonization goal. I'm going to be working with the Beyond Coal campaign to get more input into that process to get NPBD to set a decarbonization goal. Going to continue minority outreach work. I'm enjoying working with one of our young volunteer leaders. He's also a member of the XCOM, Jordan Anderson. He's doing some great work with outreach to the minority cultural centers in Lincoln. Also want to continue to develop relationships with other minority groups whose voices aren't heard in the environmental conversations, particularly our indigenous relatives and our indigenous neighbors. Indigenous people often refer to everything and everyone as their relatives. So I guess I subconsciously called indigenous people my relatives. Hopefully that's appropriate. Youth engagement. That was one of the things that McKibben mentioned, and it's one of the things that I'm passionate about. I really enjoy working with young people, and we're going to be working to support the climate strikes that the youth are working on, their divestment efforts, and also we've supported the Youth Climate Summit repeatedly and intend to continue to do that. Bill McKibben also mentioned elders. I'm working with part of a group called the Elders Climate Legacy. That's another opportunity to bring voices that sometimes aren't heard in this process. And then we need to just continue to promote clean energy wherever we have opportunities to do that. And there's lots of opportunities to get those messages out there and to talk about climate change and why we need to take action on climate change. And then finally, I just wanted to mention CO2 pipelines. That may be the next issue that we have to be addressing. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted on that. And I guess the final thing I wanted to say is looking forward to continuing to work with all the members of the chapter and with people and members of the public and everybody who's willing to get engaged on all these issues, because it, as Bill said, it takes all of us. We gotta all be working together if we're going to change climate change in a way that allows us to have a livable planet for ourselves and for our children and for, as Mike indicated, for our adorable grandchildren. Well, good visiting with you all, and look forward to continue to work with you.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks so much. We had a question come in on the chat that I would like to relay to you, if that's okay.
Sure, that'd be great.
Great. It's from Don. Is it Priester or Preister?
Preister.
Preister, Don Preister. Okay. Sorry about that, Don. People mess my name up a lot too. Thank you, Ken, for your constant frontline work. Please talk about elections to utility boards and the legislature.
Yeah, well, and that's absolutely crucial. I mean, elections are absolutely crucial. I know that Roger Garcia is going to talk a little bit about it later on, but elections make so much difference. I mean, when we had people like Don Preister and Ken Haar in the legislature, it made so much difference. The fact that a progressive board has been elected to the Omaha Public Power District, that makes a great deal of difference. The fact that I mean, and we're going to be giving an award tonight to Janece Mollhoff, and she's one of those progressive board members. And the fact that they're more progressive members of the Nebraska Public Power District Board that means that they're going to be considering the decarbonization goals that they wouldn't have been considering otherwise. So elections are absolutely crucial, and the fact that in Lincoln, the fact that we elected a progressive mayor and a progressive city council, that meant that the Lincoln Climate Action Plan was adopted. So Don, I thank you so much for all of the leaderships that you provided over the years, and glad that you're continuing to engage in those things.
Fantastic. We have a couple more minutes, and I just want to ask you. I mean, you and I have worked together on so many projects, and I just want to say thank you for that. You've always been a staple of the community, and for the good fight. I always put you in the category of the good fight. And when I met you, it was at a Sierra Club event, so it makes sense. But over the years, we talked about the Keystone XL fight, and our efforts out in the middle of a cornfield while the wind was blowing and the solar barn standing there. I'll never forget that day. Jumping up on stage with you, and I believe we sang "This Land Is Your Land" together.
Yep.
And I got
that image in my mind. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about.
We were wearing the green Nokia KXL shirts, and I realized just as I grabbed my guitar that it was actually I let Gunter Volker from Jack Hotel borrow it the night before, and he detuned it to a totally different key. So I went into panic mode, but we somehow pulled it off, and I'll never forget that day singing with you. It was just fantastic. And we even had the fire department come out and water the grounds because it was so dusty.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I remember that day. Yes, I do. And my daughter got up and
that's right.
Recited her one of her poems, and
yes.
Yes. Well, but
lots of great memories.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I'm completely serious when I say that the voices of the poets and the musicians are absolutely crucial in these kinds of fights.
I think so too.
The things that inspire people, the things that that energize people, because so much of talking about climate change can be very depressing. And the facts are very alarming. We shouldn't ignore them. We need to talk about them. We need to be aware of them. But we shouldn't allow ourselves to be caught in that place. We need to have something that energizes us and inspires us to take action. And so having music and joyful events, I think, is absolutely crucial. And having events where we can break bread and share our communion with each other,
yes,
I think is also vital.
Yes, indeed.
So,
well
thanks,
excuse
Mike.
me. Well, I've shared so many great memories with you, and I just want to, hats off to you once again for all your great work. And as we continue the fight, it's just going to be great to see where things go. And you're right, just stay optimistic and keep up the good fight. Thank you so much, Ken.
You bet. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
See you in a bit.
Okay, guys, that's Ken Winston. Fantastic. Okay, moving on here. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a tickle. It's that time of season. So as we move on, I want to introduce my next guest, Al Davis. So Al Davis grew up on a cattle ranch in the heart of the Sandhills, north of Hyannis. Al attended Creighton University and the University of Denver, graduating with a BA in History and Economics. Al also spent a year studying theater in New York City at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. That's awesome. Al's family has a long tradition of environmental stewardship on their Cherry County ranch, planting trees and pollinators, developing an extensive grazing system to promote pasture health. Over the course of 70 years, the Davis family planted nearly 500,000 trees, which provide protection to livestock and extensive cover for wildlife. Wow. Al was elected to the legislature and served there from 2013 to 2017, representing the Sandhills and the Butte County in the Panhandle. Al began lobbying for the Nebraska chapter Sierra Club during the 2021 legislative sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce my next guest, Al Davis. Here he is. Hello, Al.
Oh, Mike, and thank you for the introduction.
Absolutely.
Good, nice job. Before I begin, I'm going to talk about the AltEn situation a little bit. And before I begin, I want to give credit for much of the information that I shared tonight with you all to Lisa Zaleski. Lisa worked for many years for the Western Ag Reporter, a Billings, Montana ag newspaper. She wrote many articles dealing with abuses of the National Beef Checkoff and packer price manipulations. Lisa has spent hours researching AltEn and the history behind the plant, and this is an abbreviated version of that story based on her writings. Dennis Langley is the mastermind behind AltEn, and although now deceased, his family still operates the facility. He was the son of an oil and gas man, where Dennis learned the ins and outs of that business. Dennis began college at Hutchinson Community College in Kansas before accepting an academic scholarship to the Catholic University in Washington, where he also received both his master's and a law degree. Langley excelled at debate and was an accomplished speechwriter at one time, writing for Senator Joe Biden. Biden led the Senate Judiciary Committee at the time, and Langley was chief counsel. In the mid-'80s, the Democrats lost control of the Senate, and Langley was out of a job. He returned to the Midwest to practice law, and at that time, the gas pipeline industry was heavily regulated, but Langley saw an opportunity to get into that business as he saw deregulation coming. With investors, he leveraged his purchase of the pipeline operating company into a multi-billion-dollar assemblage of oil and gas pipelines. Langley also played an outsized role in the future of the Democratic Party in Kansas and nationally, at one time serving in the number 3 position in the National Party. Langley sensed a change coming to the industry and sold Pipeline Operating Company in 1995, investing in a corporate entity he called E3 Biofuels, or Earth, Energy, and Environment LLC, which was the lead investor in the plant we refer to today as AltEn. Always a little ahead of the game, Langley saw an opportunity in a rapidly new developing industry, the ethanol industry. Following the establishment of renewable fuel standards in 2005, the E3 biofuels plant at Meade was planned to incorporate several new green ideas, which would combine the use of manure from the feedlot at Meade Cattle Company as the source of methane gas, which would then be burned to power boilers, which would then steep corn and produce ethanol. To promote the development of the industry, ethanol producers received a 45-cent federal subsidy for each gallon produced, and oil refineries were required to add ethanol to their fuel in order to sell it. The corn waste material is also a remarkably good feedstuff, highly palatable to cattle, whether fed in the wet stage or the dry one. That substance is referred to as distiller's grain or as wet cake. The wastewater remaining from the process would be piped into pivots and applied to neighboring fields, while the distiller's grain would go back to feed the livestock in the feedlot. All in all, the feedlot would hold 30,000 head, while the ethanol plant would require millions of bushels of locally produced corn, raising the basis price for that annually, and produced from 2,500 acres of Saunders County farmland. So it all just sounds wonderful to this point, doesn't it? And that's when things began to snowball and go out of control. Although not confirmed, it seems logical that the plant received significant financial incentives from the U.S. government, which was promoting these digesters at the time, but the village of Meade also signed on to assist E3 Biofuels when it was built, granting the company $5 million in tax increment financing and annexing neighboring farm ground to provide the TIF necessary, since tax increment financing can only be provided by incorporated communities. The state-of-the-art plant received great publicity when it was launched, with dignitaries on hand for the ribbon cutting and proclamations that this was going to be the future of agriculture, producing 20 to 60 million gallons of ethanol annually. Governor Heinemann attended the ribbon cutting, as did many others, including a representative of the National Resource Defense Council. The digester system was proclaimed to be a revolutionary new model, which would reduce the number one source of water pollution across the country, manure, and would therefore contribute to reducing carbon footprints of agricultural enterprises. Despite the sunny proclamations of Governor Heinemann and others about the wonders of the new plant, the primary digester had exploded 5 months before the grand opening, and the plant took bankruptcy just 5 months after the ribbon cutting. The enterprise was built on a web of debt, so any small problem would produce headaches for the bankers. The digester explosion was the catalyst for the collapse. Saunders County itself gave up over $2 million in property taxes due when E3 Biofuels took bankruptcy, but bank losses exceeded $100 million on that investment, and many area farmers and merchants lost money also, since they were required to remit any payments they received in the last 90 days from the company to be redistributed by the bankruptcy court. As years went by, though through a number of parent ownership transitions, all the time it was under the guidance of Dennis Langley and his associates. In 2014, an enterprise by the name of Platte River Green Fields filed documents of ownership and used the same address as AltEn, which then reopened for business in 2015. And AltEn shared the same address as E3 Biofuels. About a year later, residents of Meade noticed a literal change in the air, and this would be 2016. A foul odor was emerging from the AltEn plant, which had an acrid and stinging bite to it. Individuals had runny, bloody noses who were exposed to air, but no one knew where the odor had initially originated, although there was speculation that it was coming from AltEn. Complaints began piling up at the Nebraska Department of the Environment, which later morphed into the Nebraska Department of Energy and the Environment. So what had transitioned at AltEn, and why was the production at that site different from a traditional ethanol plant? The answer really is as shocking as it is compelling. AltEn had developed a new niche industry, and one which solved a major problem for those who produce treated seeds. Each year, the large seed manufacturers produce seed corn, wheat, soybeans, and other seeds for sale to area farmers. These seeds are treated with pesticides to prevent fungus from destroying a crop and to keep insects at bay. Supply and demand being an unknown, the seed companies must produce an oversupply of these seeds to secure enough to provide planters the seed they need, and there is no opportunity to produce additional seeds in a timely manner since planting season is so short. Therefore, there is always a massive oversupply of treated seed, which must be disposed of and should be burned or buried, both expensive propositions. AltEn saw the opportunity to secure an unlimited supply of free grain, which could be converted to ethanol and sold at a profit, which also eligible for the generous subsidies provided by entities who purchase the ethanol credits, as is done in California. And so ethanol production began again at AltEn, but this time using treated seeds. Now, AltEn had a problem. Labeling requirements stated that treated seeds could not be fed to livestock. So the normal method of disposal was for the wet distiller's grain was prohibited. AltEn's strategy was twofold. They would apply the wet distiller's grain to neighboring fields as a soil conditioner, while also investing in technology to produce biochar, which is a rich fertilizer produced in the absence of oxygen. The company failed to notify the landowners where the soil conditioner was being applied, however, that the product had massive amounts of pesticides and fungicides inside and was a toxic souffle of death and destruction. As a result, the Eastern Nebraska Research Station, which is owned by the university, was one of the beneficiaries of the AltEn soil conditioner, as were many neighboring landowners. Meanwhile, the waste steep liquor was accumulating on the site in lagoons, which were damaged years before at the time of installation. The toxic soup leaked through the liners and soaked into the soil below, and the floods of 2019 swept much of it downstream, destroying a pond 6 miles downstream on its way to the Platte River. Complaints followed and piled up at NDEE. Letters threatening fines were issued, reissued, and issued again. Yet AltEn continued to operate, continued to produce its toxic mix, and continued to land apply the wet cake. Finally, in 2019, the Department of Ag ordered AltEn to stop applying wet cake to neighboring fields, but that didn't stop the company from going forward with its business model. Now, instead of applying the wet cake to unsuspecting neighbors, the company began piling it up on site and continued to reach out to producers of treated seed, advertising just 14 months ago about their willingness to take treated seeds and bragging that the plant managed 98% of all treated seeds produced in North America. As Chris Dunker so effectively explained in his recent article, the wet cake accumulated on the AltEn site, if piled up on the football field at Memorial Stadium, would reach nearly to the top of the west side of the stadium. And the tonnage accumulated at the bottom of the lagoons, which is also heavily poisoned, would add an additional 60 feet to Chris's figures, overtopping the west side of the field by 35 feet, the west side of the stadium. Chris also stated that the water in the lagoons is the equivalent of 273 Olympic swimming pools full of poison. Judy Wismart will give you a nice explanation of the science behind the AltEn plant, but I want to focus on what went wrong with government. Documents produced in 2016 indicate that NDE knew what was going on at Meade. There were dozens of complaints from Meade residents, all of which fell on deaf ears. NDEE's objective seemed to be an interest in coaching the industry to compliance, but that cannot be done if the enterprise doesn't intend to follow what legislators and regulators have laid down as proper protocol. Slapping someone on the hands works for some enterprises which are morally responsible, but not for enterprises whose goals are to maximize earnings at the expense of public health and common decency. Threatened fines were never imposed by the state attorney general, who had purview over that action, and NDE did not approach legislators asking to tighten regulations to try and manage a company which was operating outside the norm. You can't look the other way when confronting a company which has no intention of following the rules. Most of you probably know the rest of the story. The Guardian broke the story in early January 2021, and Senator Bostelman, who represents the area, introduced a bill which bans the use of treated seed corn in ethanol production, a bill we supported and which passed. During the polar vortex of February, a line froze and broke, sending a stream of polluted water and feces downstream through the Research Center and the National Guard Center, which is nearby. Since that time, there have been countless instances where rainwater caused flooding in the area, which resulted in pesticide-treated water moving off the site and onto neighboring farm fields and down to ponds and on into the Platte River. Wells near Ashland now show traces of pesticide, and the seed companies have taken the lead in cleaning up the site. Ken Winston and I drafted a resolution asking for a special legislative committee to be formed to examine what went wrong at Meade. Senator Blood took that resolution on, but Senator Hughes, who's head of the executive committee, refused to schedule it due to the session coming to a close so soon after it was submitted. It is ironic to me that rural senators deride government regulations as interfering with business, yet rise to defend that same government when lack of action results in environmental damage, as has occurred at Meade. A group of interested individuals containing several people on this call tonight was formed last spring. Called the Perivolon Group, the members include Janece Mollhoff, Ken Winston, David Corbin, Judy Wismart, and me. Senator Blood has also been a major player in our work. Our goal is to focus attention on what went wrong at Meade to prevent future catastrophes like this one, which lacks any concept of what the ultimate cost will be in dollars and cents. What will happen to the people at Meade? Has their health been jeopardized? Will they have effects appearing 10 years from now, 20? No one knows, because there are no cases of long-term exposure to these pesticides. So Meade is a guinea pig of live human beings with pets, children, parents, and friends. Never think of the seed companies as the heroes in this mess. They surely knew what was going on, but went forward in pursuit of the almighty dollar. Meade is paying the price, and we just can't stand for this in the future. Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the members of the Sierra Club who have been such great supporters in the work we're trying to do here. I think you're muted, Mike.
Thank you so much, Al. Appreciate it. I was with you out in Meade. I believe you were there at the town hall, at the church there. And the energy in that room was palpable. I mean, it was frustration and confusion and fear. And it was so eye-opening to me that not a lot of people knew about it, the situation there. I just want to ask you a few questions about that, and how obviously these types of things are helping get the word out. But, you know, I was personally shocked by what was happening in Meade, and I just didn't know about it.
I think we all were, Mike. I think it absolutely doesn't even register in my brain that there could be this kind of incredibly inept and poorly managed endeavor right in front of our noses. And NDE was informed time and time again by the residents out there that there was a problem. And basically they just said, well, there's nothing we can do. Well, we'll issue these fines, these letters, with these fines, but nothing was done.
But wasn't the company was already in debt, or had so many racked up fines?
The company has racked up lots of fines. They haven't paid their property taxes for years. There are mechanic liens against the property, and I think those are over $500,000. I mean, it's just a string of sort of shocking events that have transpired there.
Right.
I think it just demonstrates. Well, I think NDE really should have gone to the legislature if they didn't have any ability to do anything else and say, we need some regulations and rules here that can tamp down on this. And this is an example of it. I really think it would be hard for anybody to say, well, we just don't want to do that.
Right.
You know, at the legislative level when you're confronted with these kind of facts. And, you know, there have been two town halls there. Bold, Nebraska participated with Sierra Club in the first one.
Yes.
And I think that was the one you were at.
Yes, it was.
And then Senator Blood put together a second one. She did a masterful job of that. And, there were several state senators there. Senator Bossman was asked to come, and he said he had other things to do, which was to go to, I think, Columbus and talk about, critical race theory or something. I mean,
Okay.
Where's the priority here?
Sure.
These are your constituents. Now, there's talk of maybe $20 million that's going to have to be appropriated from the Appropriations Committee. The university, in their study, and you'll hear from Judy about some of this, but the university estimated they would need about 10 years and at least $10 million to sort of do some of the long-term study of this. So, I mean, if you don't crack down on people who are doing things inappropriately at the time, and you're the state government, you're just inviting massive debt or massive obligations to clean up the mess.
Right. There was one question that really pushed it over the edge for me. I believe someone asked, can everybody that has experienced illness in the room please stand up? And granted, you got to visualize, this room was packed with people. How many people do you think, Al? Maybe 100, 150 were there that night?
I think there were more than 100 there that day.
It was a lot of people. Yeah. And it was in a church that wasn't that large. And I would say a good percentage of people stood up when that question was asked. It was unbelievable to me. So that was people that have been sick and affected by illness from this byproduct, I guess.
There were sick animals. There were a couple of dead raccoons that were found. So I talked about the wet cake, and there was a pile of this wet cake that hadn't been spread on the field. And, somebody reported some dead raccoons, and then a woman had some dead dogs,
right.
Or not dead, but sick dogs.
Right.
Well, you think about that, but you've got long-term exposure by the people that are living there. And not just that. And I've said, this is one of the things that I think we've sort of let go beyond because we can't do much about it. But cattle in the feedlot right next door are breathing in the dust off that plant day in and day out, day in and day out. So what happens to that?
There's a question here.
They'll go on to the processor and become, consumption.
Right.
People, so
there's a question I want to get to real quick here, Al. I appreciate your back and forth with me. Are there efforts underway to hold the Langley and Shaw families accountable for their role as the capitalists in charge?
Not that I know of. I'm not sure that there are any statutory laws that we need to look into that, which would be able to bring them to justice. Dennis Langley is dead, so he can't be, he's escaped justice there. And, and I talked about the work Lisa had done. She has just been a dog about this piece, but she's the one that traced this all back to the same entities with similar email addresses.
Sure.
Of the Shaws and the other folks. So Mr. Shaw is I believe, a stepson of Dennis Langley. And now Scott Tingelhoff is the manager of the plant out there, but there's nobody out there really except Scott Tingelhoff and his wife. Tingelhoff was the former Saunders County prosecutor who I think got into some trouble with the accountability and disclosure and lost his job and then picked that job up right away after that. So,
oh, wow.
He might have some liability too.
And
we didn't mention the biochar just a little bit. That's another thing that needs to be investigated. What's happened to all the biochar that was produced out there? Because, people that are going to buy that are probably trying to do some holistic, organic type work. The last thing I think they would want is a product that's just saturated with pesticides and fungicides.
It was amazing to me, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but the insects and how they were affected and tested over time. That was incredible to me as well. But it seemed to me a lot of those families owned land around there. So they can't really move because they own so much land around there.
Well, right. They I suppose they could move, but there is some I mean, I would think that the valuation of that land would be
Right.
tainted somewhat by the proximity to the damage. And, you know, some of this, I mean, we go down to the Kaiser Pond, 6 miles south of town. That was a fish pond that this family has used for so many years, completely killed. There's nothing living in it. And,
Wow.
you know, I think there were a few months ago, there were a couple of dead beavers that were found right there close to the pond. And unfortunately, those were not processed, but, you know, you have to speculate that if two beavers are found very close to get together on the edge of that pond, it was probably because of what they picked up through the pesticides that they were exposed to.
Sure. Wow. And it's right in our neighborhood. I mean, it's not that far from Lincoln.
Right.
You
You
know,
know, it's rural Nebraska, but it's like 20 miles from Omaha and 30 from
Yeah,
Lincoln.
right by Wahoo, Nebraska.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got a lot of dear friends in Wahoo, and they all talk about it. They all know about it. Everybody knows about it. They know about the byproduct. They know about the situation there. So it's startling. It really is.
I think when Judy talks about the bees, and I was up at in Wahoo for one of the hearings on the solar plant that was going in at UTAN. And one of the farmers there, I just overheard him say, he said, well, there aren't any bees in Saunders County anymore. And that's the reason.
Oh, wow. We had a question come in from Lori Benson. She says, of course, we need to have a thorough cleanup of mead, but I'm concerned the state will raid the environmental trust funds to help pay for cleanup. Is that being discussed?
I haven't heard that. I anticipate that will probably happen, that there will be an effort to secure funding through the trust. We'll have to wait and see. But, you know, people are going to go for the low-hanging fruit, and trust funds are the low-hanging fruit. And as we all know, the trust has been through a tumultuous year or two. We've lost Mark Broman there, who was an advocate really for environmental issues. I think there are worse things that trust fund could be used for, but I'd rather see it used for the things that we traditionally support, which are things that really center around helping wildlife rather than cleaning up somebody's toxic soup.
I agree. Good question, Lori. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, great information tonight, Al. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And again, you're in the good fight. We're all in the good fight, you know, putting a microscope over these types of things in Nebraska, the land we care about.
Well, I want to really give a shout out to the people I mentioned. There are several other people that are part of the Provolone group, but you know, these we meet every week and we have spirited discussions, and we have people that research, like Janece, who's a dogged researcher. She brings things to our attention all the time. So we're not going to let it go away, and we're going to need the help of the Sierra Club members also.
Yes.
You need to contact your state senators and tell them what an outrage this is, and that we can't have this kind of thing going on in Nebraska.
I 100% agree with that as well. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on with the program. If anybody watching tonight wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Should I put my stuff in the chat? I'm not sure how this works.
Sure. If you'd like to, yeah, go ahead and place it in the chat. Or if there's a website available, we can also put that up. But yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat for everybody, and make sure to do that. It should pop up on the chat here. So, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Al, and you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, Al Davis, everybody. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to place his contact information in the chat now, both on YouTube and Facebook, for everybody to grab that if they would like. And this is his contact information. Thank you so much again, Al. Appreciate it. Okay, as we move on here, this is my pleasure, and I got to see her speak once again as well, and I believe she was out in Meade as well, and I'm so excited to introduce her because she's filled with fascinating information. Dr. Judy Wu Smart, assistant professor and extension specialist, grew up in Concord, California, and received her BS degree in zoology at Humboldt State University. She also completed an MS degree at Washington State University and received her PhD from the University of Minnesota. She currently serves as a director of the University of Nebraska Bee Lab. That's BEE. That's right. We were just talking about bees. specifically out near Meade and Saunders County. At UNL, she and her team have been developing a robust pollinator health program to help beekeepers, scientists, policymakers, and land managers understand the underlying stressors challenging bee health, including pests, disease, malnutrition, and exposure to pesticides. It's my pleasure to welcome Judy Woo Smart. Here she is. Okay, let's get, there she is.
Hi.
Hello. I'll give it to you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and having this opportunity to kind of share. This is a wonderful organization. And let me get my screen going here. Let's see. That's not right. Hey, Mike, I can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Once you share your screen, you'll just want to bring up your PowerPoint and minimize your browser screen.
Oh, it's doing that funny thing where it's making me want to it's not allowing me to share again.
Oh, let's try it. Let's try it one more time. Maybe. Yep, there you go.
There we go. All right, let's try this. How's that?
Just seeing white.
Oh, just seeing white, huh?
Sorry, folks. Here we are in the virtual world. We'll figure it out here.
That's interesting. It worked last night, huh?
Yeah.
Wait.
We'll get it to work. When it asks you to share your whole screen, just go ahead and choose whole screen.
All right, I did that. And I minimized this window.
There you go.
PowerPoint. Is it working now?
Yep, you got it.
Yay! All right. So thank you very much. I appreciate your patience. Again, my name is Dr. Judy Wismar. I have been working at this UNLV lab for about 5 to 6 years now. It's been a pleasure being part of this university, but it is, however, been extremely frustrating and difficult to start a new program with a lot of different apiaries successfully keeping bees, and then one location in particular where no matter what you do, the bees just are not surviving. And this is a video, an example of what was occurring with our colonies that we were placing up at Meade, Nebraska. And so this all kind of started with us just trying to figure out why these bees were dying, what they were becoming exposed to, and more importantly, what it's saying about the place, what they're foraging around and the environment that they're surrounded with. And so this really did kind of lead us to stumble across what was happening here at AltEn, which was the use of this surplus and outdated pesticide-treated crop seed in the production of ethanol. And Al gave a great summary of what was going on there. But I just want to show that this is an image of kind of the site itself. Some of these have evolved and changed dramatically over the last year, actually year and a half. And so there's been a lot of changes on this site, and it has a lot to do with these current efforts with both the Perry Vallon group, the research team, and the public awareness surrounding this. And so as far as the research community has approached this system, is that we've really realized that it is really beyond just bees, and it has to be looked at kind of at a more holistic manner, looking at the One Health approach, which basically follows that there's a strong understanding that there's a connection between the quality of our environment and the quality of our human health, our communities, as well as our ecosystems. And so these systems are all tied strongly together. And so if there is something happening within a system, it's important to look at what the ramifications are across the landscape. And so this was kind of, the bees were kind of a flag as far as our team was concerned in informing us that there was something wrong with this landscape. And that we do have a pretty large team that I want to just acknowledge these are students, past and present, some of our graduate students as well as our undergraduate students. We have a number of technicians. A lot of the work that we do in terms of the research and the education and training is really student led and delivered by a lot of support by our staff and our wonderful crew. So there's been a lot of people who have been supporting these efforts, and our team has really focused on a lot of on-farm research and training programs, and that has led us to develop a lot of partners within the community. And that is really, really important for us, is to not only be able to understand and research aspects of conservation and pollinator health, but also to be able to train our students to be able to communicate that science and the importance of advocacy in these areas and in working and engaging with these partners. So certainly we are available, throughout the state in various outreach and extension manners. But how we ended up at Mead, Nebraska was through this research project, which was looking at, and this was looking at really how we could potentially strategically place pollinator habitats with pesticide barriers in mind. And we were thinking that the role of tree lines and shrubbery in an agroecosystem could protect or create refuge for pollinator habitat to be uncontaminated with chemicals. And so this was the setup that we had at NREC at various sites within this research property. And we also had bees along this property. Turns out we didn't realize that this research property was so close in proximity to the ethanol plant. Our honey house is approximately a mile and a half away from, the property line. And we were finding within our research extremely odd contaminated levels of plants, and our bees were unable to survive. And so it took us several years to try to rule out on-farm practices and really kind of identify that there could potentially be contaminants with associated with the waterways. And that's when we started to reach out to the state agriculture and NDA and EPA, as well as NDE, regarding kind of these research and bee loss concerns. One, to see if they could help us fix or to help us investigate why these bees were dying, but also to try to figure out exactly how to mitigate further losses or exposures, because this was happening year after year after year. And so, unfortunately, this was something that was outside of FIFRA, this is not the misuse of a pesticide application, but rather some sort of pollution. And so we really weren't able to get assistance looking at this issue. And we started to put more hives out on location, but within a week, we started seeing rapid losses again. And this was last year in 2020. And this is in comparison to all these other locations. We're not seeing these abnormal losses and rapid spilling of bees. So a lot of our program had to shift to really investigate how do we help beekeepers in similar situations like ours figure out what to do when you have these persistent losses or indicators that something was wrong, but you really don't have a solid idea of why or the origin of these exposures. So we have evolved our program and have been impacted significantly by this. And we continue to work in this area because this is when I was following waterways, trying to figure out what could potentially be leading into these. This is what I came across, and that was in last year in 2020. And you can see a lot of this pesticide-laden solid waste is unprotected. It's sitting out on the soil without any kind of protection or berms. And so I really want to commend this group's efforts and everybody who's been involved with Perry Vallon and the research community who have all continued to persist on this ash issue, because even from here, July 2020, you can see that these waste piles were extremely high and large and vast. And now a lot of it has been dealt with. A lot of it has There has been berms constructed. There has been mitigation plans developed. There's been so much more action that has happened just in the last year than since this issue was first became people became first aware of this issue. So what I'm showing here is this pesticide-laden waste that is produced from the seed product. But one of the concerns is that these systemic pesticides can often move from water into soil and through the plant systems. So we have been studying neonicotinoids and fungicides that have that systemic action for a number of decades because their ability to express themselves in nectar and pollen, where we see bees and other wildlife become exposed. And so this is an issue where it's an unprecedented, unpredictable circumstance in which you have high elevated levels of these systemic chemicals that are potentially running off or leaching into the soil and being picked up by the plants surrounding there. And so downstream from us, the research site, I was seeing evidence of bees dying mid-foraging. These are bees, foraging for water. Lots of natural wildflowers along the roadsides, along the natural drainages that could be collecting some of this runoff. Arthropods that were just acting very abnormal, butterflies that are inhibited or locomotorily, and it's very difficult when you see insects like this to see if they're sick because of a chemical exposure, or maybe they're just malnourished or they've picked up a pathogen or a disease. But we do see these as signs where insects are dying with, before they reach adulthood, or they're having some locomotor issues. So when we did first come across this issue, my first move was to contact some of our partners at Xerces. Sarah Hoyle has been incredible at helping us understand some of the current policies and regulations behind neonicotinoid insecticides. Their organization has produced a lot of really interesting material and literature review related to the impacts of these insecticides on invertebrates. And then we also reached out to NRDC, and these folks have a lot of knowledge on potentially how this could have happened, or how to potentially advise folks to prevent this from happening. And they were aware of this very early on in discussions, because we were just trying to figure out exactly how to approach the scenario. So very early on, they were able to submit for public comment some of their concerns related to AltEn. And I want to show that this was in June 2020. So these have been conversations that have been happening for a while behind the scenes, just trying to figure out how do we get the research support to kind of investigate this circumstance. And both of the recommendations that came from Xerces and NRDC partners was to bring public awareness into this picture, because a lot could be moved with the support of the community. And so that is when a lot of us started to reach out for a little bit more understanding of, the scenario, and to be able to help support recruitment with more experts and researchers. It was really hard to get people to help support the research when very little awareness was known about the scenario, the situation, and the severity of it as well. So Carrie Gillum from The Guardian was the first one interested to pick up this article. And I have to commend her as well, because this is a very complicated story. And so she did an incredible job synthesizing all this complexity into a really easy, digestible piece for people. And that really is what helped launch our ability to recruit more researchers. Then shortly after that, there was a spill from the digesters from the meat cattle facility at the adjacent facility. But they did, there was some AltEn byproducts used in that digester. And so there were concerns that some of these high chemical loads, even fertilizer loads, were going into the system. And I do want to say that when I was out there, it has been a little bit frustrating to see potentially a lot of this exposure or wildlife getting into the spill wading into it and really having very little ability to assess the impact of these birds that will fly off, 10 minutes later or 5 minutes later. So we've been doing a lot of partnering with folks all over the place. Creighton University has had an incredible number of researchers that have stepped up. John Shallis has helped us with drone imagery of runoff sites to kind of identify flow paths. He's helped us recruit students like John Quigley to also help us do that. Pierce Greenberg has created some really incredible story maps. I encourage you to check that out. It's on the Xerces AltEn website. This is incredible scientific communication tools that really help us explain what's going on in a very visible manner. And I want to kind of emphasize the importance of this effort now, because we do have a number of projects that are citizen science based, trying to understand what we have in terms of our pollinators in the state. Katie Lamke was a previous student, and she was just recently in the newspaper talking about how the American bumblebee seems to be doing very well here in Nebraska so far. So we want to kind of maintain the habitat for these species that are starting to become more endangered and threatened in other habitats. And so I just have a couple more videos to show you what's going on site. Not a lot of people really are. This one on the left is of a thistle patch that we came across that has every single order of insect represented that happens to be dead on the plant. And mind you, in circumstances like this, we don't really know if something if this was a natural cause, something exuded by the plant itself, or if this is due to chemical load in the plant. So we have to wait until the pesticide data can confirm it. But it does seem suspicious to have several different types of insects impacted at once. Normally, we think of these beneficial insects, bees and pollinators, to be more sensitive, whereas pest insects might not be as much. But in this circumstance, everything was dead. And so even if you aren't really, care too much about insects, and a lot of people aren't really too worried about the loss of insects, consider the fact that these are food support systems for a lot of other wildlife. And so we do see other examples of birds and small mammals, skunks and mammals feeding on the dead bees within our traps and within our colonies. This one is a bird, and I'm not a bird specialist. I won't guess to what its species is. But what I found abnormal was that it was completely unaware of my presence, which you can see my foot, and my apiary manager is standing right on the other side of that colony. So the presence of two humans very closely to this bird was just completely unaware. It just seemed peculiar behavior, and we do see a lot of that. So this is just a very busy diagram, but I want people to remember that while I study bees, I think that these are bioindicator systems that suggest that there could be short-term ramifications on other bioindicator species, as well as long-term ramifications on all of these higher order animals that rely on the food support that these invertebrates provide. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and I want to highlight the efforts of the research UNMC and UNL team, who are looking to try to identify all these environmental, human, and wildlife impacts that are happening here. It's a huge endeavor. It's a One Health approach that is, I think, one of its kind and very unique. But I think it's really important to consider the fact that this is the way that the approaches have to be, because with climate change and impacts on a number of things in our food system related to climate change, there's going to be, I think, a lot of more pressure on crop pests. And consider the fact that if this location is persistently expressing or chronically showing low levels of chemicals, or even hotspots of high chemicals, there might be losses of populations of insects in some areas, but there might be other populations of insects that start to become more resistant to insecticides. And this isn't just crop pests, but we're also talking about potential insects that vector diseases. You know, we as Nebraskans seem to have high incidences of West Nile virus, and that is vectored by mosquitoes. So these are all things that we would be really interested in looking at, is not just the loss of pollinators, but the impacts on the crop pests and insects that can vector human diseases. So the last thing I wanted to mention is the fact that this local issue happening in Nebraska is having really national impacts, and it's just starting right now. But a lot of states are starting to look at what is happening in Nebraska and trying to prevent or prepare themselves for how to handle treated seed issues themselves. So some of them are developing what they're calling extended producer responsibility bills, where they're looking to see that the seed companies are responsible for their product at the birth, as well as all the way through the disposal aspect of it. There's a number of things that I think the states are looking to do to kind of address these federal exemption loopholes. And so I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on Nebraska and a lot of interest moving forward. And it is to the credit of the Perry Vallon Group, as well as the researchers, to continue their efforts and keep this in the public domain and keep things rolling. I mean, it's sometimes hard to keep up with the pace that it's going, but it's a necessary for us to keep moving in the positive direction. And so lastly, I just want to say that this is continuing to happen right now. This is yesterday, actually, or 2 days ago, I went out to inspect, and we're still losing colonies out there. But I just wanted to say that this effort couldn't be done without the support of our department. We have a number of incredible faculty that are starting to help support the research efforts, and my family, of course, which they take a lot of the brunt of me working overtime to try to figure out what's going on. Okay, and so I just want to leave with that.
Thank you, Judy. Dr. Judy, I should say. There was your contact information. I just want to remind people that this stream will be up forever on the page, so you can go back and find her contact information that she flashed on the screen there. If anybody has any questions for you. Fantastic information. I love hearing your speak. I find it just fascinating and very interesting to me, and I'm a layman. So thank you so much for everything you do. And keep up the good fight. I love that the attention's kind of moving over to Nebraska. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and it's, as unfortunate as the circumstance, of all this has brought us together, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and there's a lot of support for the science and the community engagement. So we're really excited to be working together. And I look forward to continually to kind of foster these relationships. Fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. You enjoy the rest of your evening with your family. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Take care. Okay, folks. Fantastic. All right. Moving forward here. I'm going to bop that right on. I want to welcome back now Ken Winston and Al Davis to present the awards to Judy Wu-Smart, Dr. Judy Wu-Smart, who we just saw, Carol Blood, Chris Dunker, and Janece Mollhoff. I will invite them back on the screen here. Hi, Ken and Al Davis. All right. I'll pass it over to you.
Do you want to invite Judy back on the screen? Well, thank you, Judy, for your wonderful presentation. And I always learn something every time I hear you speak, and thank you so much. Well, it gives me a great pleasure to present you with the award that, well, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm glad to see that the Nebraska Sierra Club has chosen to give you an environmental, I believe it's an Environmental Leadership Award. And let me just read quickly that Judy Wu-Smart brought the AltEn environmental disaster to public attention. Is your work with nobody knew about it Environmental Champion Award. So she introduced the disaster to public attention, and she provides connections to both the local community and to scientific knowledge about what is happening in the area. She continues to educate people about the nature of the issues involved, as well as working with a team of experts put together by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and Creighton University. She provides an invaluable resource to the community by helping people understand the benefits of bees and other pollinators. Well, congratulations, Judy, and we're glad to present you with this award this evening.
Thank you. I had a wonderful opportunity. Can I thank everybody in the presentation? They did an excellent job trying to help support this effort. And I will accept the award on behalf of all the bees that have helped with this and the loss of our bees. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Well deserved.
So Ken and I divvied up the award giving, and I ended up with Carol Blood, and I'm so pleased to be the one that is introducing that. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge what a remarkable woman Senator Blood is. She's a boiling kettle of energy and determination, with a keen eye for what is right about government and what is wrong with it. As such, she's been a real leader in the Nebraska legislature, working with some of the most difficult individuals a person could imagine. Believe me, I know all about that. And doing so with grace and laughter. She asks the tough questions, searches for the correct answers, digs into a subject, and knows how to grab the attention when it needs to be grabbed. And she has been instrumental in drawing needed attention to the fiasco at Mead, Nebraska, and her concern for the residents of Mead is passionate and sincere. She's a friend and a compatriot to all, and we're lucky to have her working on our behalf in Lincoln. Senator Carol Blood is a Nebraska native. She raised her family in Sarpy County. She and her husband, Joe, have been married for more than 32 years and are blessed with 3 children and 10 grandchildren. Blood has been a business consultant since 2005 and helps hundreds of business owners over the years start, maintain, and expand successful startups. Prior to starting her own business, she was the executive director of the Sarpy County Chamber of Commerce. Carol Blood has been an active volunteer and community advocate in Nebraska for decades. She began her political career in 2008 when elected to the Bellevue City Council as the only at-large representative on the council. Her efforts on the city council were dedicated to addressing quality of life issues and to ensure that the community remains safe and secure. These efforts included saving taxpayers over $20 million on a new public safety campus. Blood was elected to the Nebraska legislature in 2016 and represents District 3, which includes segments of western Bellevue and southeastern Papillion, Nebraska. As a Nebraska senator, one of her key priorities is area veterans and their families. Her first comprehensive licensure bill as a freshman senator was LB 88 and was passed unanimously and signed into law. Since that time, an additional 8 bills that support Nebraska's veteran and military families have been passed. Throughout her first term, Blood has also brought forward successful legislation to help women, children, and those with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't put enough praise on Senator Blood and what she has done for Mead and the people there, drawing attention to their concerns, listening, offering solutions, helping with the Perivalon group, offering to introduce good legislation, being willing to introduce the resolution at the end of the session last year. The Sierra Club has a real advocate in the work Carol Blood has done on Mead and other things. So without any further ado, I want to congratulate Senator Blood for winning this award. It's much deserved, and appreciate all your support, Senator.
Well, thank you. I'm actually truly humbled and surprised. And I just want to say that it's been an honor to serve with both Ken, Al, and everyone else on the Pavilion group. I feel like I'm hanging out with the cool kids. There's much to be done, but we can get this done together. We know that real property rights are about having clean water to drink and bathe in, and being able to eat the vegetables that we grow in our gardens, and being able to breathe clean air. And we need to make sure that that message continues to be loud and proud and gets out to all Nebraskans, because we have the ability now with Mead, be it so unfortunate, to really educate Nebraskans about what really property rights are about. and how it's been ignored for decades in Nebraska. So I'm humbled, I am excited, and I look forward to working with all of you more in the future because there's so much more work to be done.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations. It's great to work with you.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
It's been educational for sure.
And now you get to hear from me a second time. This time I'm going to talk a little bit about Chris Dunker. Being a reporter is challenging work these days. As newspapers lose revenue, they are forced to lose staff also. And that means that every staff person still on board must take on new responsibilities and new beats. The decline of regional newspapers is a devastating blow to the democracy because democracy thrives on open windows and clean air, which requires a dedicated and hardworking media presence at every level. The media is often derided for failure and rarely lauded for success, which is truly sad since the media is really the conscience of the democracy. Chris Dunker has demonstrated just what a good reporter can accomplish. He's the consummate professional in every way. His articles are hard-hitting and exhaustively researched. Chris is a native of Beatrice and a graduate of Nebraska Wesleyan University. He started his career at his hometown newspaper, the Beatrice Daily Sun, in 2008 before moving to the Journal-Star in 2014. At the Journal-Star, he has covered higher education, the legislature, and other topics that interest him. Earlier this year, he became the Journal-Star's de facto reporter on AltEn and has written nearly 30 articles about the ethanol plant since February. Outside of work, Chris enjoys going for walks, working in the yard, and spending time with his wife Tara, and kids, Cecilia, age 4, and Henry, age 1. In Chris's most recent article in AltEn, he built a physical image, which is hard to get out of one's mind, and that image is resonating with everyone who read that article that day. It was a stroke of genius, which every Nebraskan can identify with, since there are very few Nebraskans who haven't been inside Memorial Stadium. Chris pointed out that the piles of wet cake at the AltEn facility, if piled on Tom Osborne Field, would nearly reach the top of the West Stadium, and then the contaminated water on the site would accommodate 273 Olympic swimming pools. That's what a good reporter does. He brings it all home. Thank you, Chris Dunker, for your efforts, and congratulations on receiving this award this evening. It's very much deserved.
Thank you very much, Senator Davis. I really appreciate it. I was really surprised when I got notified that I was going to get this a couple of weeks ago. Watching Judy Wu-Smart's presentation earlier, I was surprised when I started seeing the Guardian article being shared around in January. Before that, I had never heard of AltEn, but we started talking around the newsroom that we needed to follow up and cover it too, as hard as that can be to kind of swallow your pride as a reporter who gets scooped. And so I've just kind of dug in since then and really owe everything to the people of Meade and the surrounding area for opening up, their homes to me, being willing to take my phone calls. I owe a lot to Judy and the rest of the researchers at UNL and Creighton and UNMC for answering some of my probably pretty dumb questions with a lot of grace and patience. And, to my bosses at the Journal-Star for seeing a good story and carving out some time to let me keep pursuing it in the way that I feel it needs to be pursued, and hope to continue following the story as long as it takes to, realize some kind of finality to it and some kind of justice to it for the people of Meade and the surrounding area. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Ken?
Okay, well, I think I'm supposed to announce an award to Janece Mollhoff, and I believe she submitted a video. Well, Janece is somebody, she's a personal friend of mine, and she's really done a lot of great things on lots of levels. She's been a leader with the League of Women Voters. She's a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army. She served on the Ashland City Council and was elected to the OPPD board in 2018. In 2019, the OPPD board voted to adopt the decarbonization goal, and that goal is to decarbonize by 2050, and they're currently engaged in a decarbonization planning process. She's also provided a great deal of leadership and been very dogged in her research related to the AltEn situation, because living in Ashland, she's very close to the area, and she's been great in terms of her work and helping expose that crisis. She's provided a great deal of leadership and connection to the community in regard to the AltEn environmental disaster. So I'm proud to be able to present the Community Environmental Leadership Award to Janece Mollhoff.
I'm honored tonight to accept the Community Environmental Leadership Award. Thank you so much for this recognition. It's fitting that the focus of this award is community, because this circle of environmentalists have brought me to where I am today. I want to thank the members of the great organizations I've worked with along the way: the Sierra Club, League of Women Voters, Citizens Climate Lobby, Nebraska Conservation Voters, Nebraska Wildlife Federation, the Nebraska Farmers Union, Center for Rural Affairs, the Nature Conservancy, Interfaith Power and Light, and others who've collaborated with me. We are more effective when we work together to fight this environmental battle. And we can't stop pushing for measures to mitigate climate disaster and limit pollution of our air, water, and soil. It's only together that we can hold AltEn and others like them accountable for their contamination of natural resources. Together we can move OPPD and other utilities to net zero emissions. And together we can fight off despair through community action. Stay with me and keep working, and thank you so very much.
What a great statement by Janece, and what a great group of honorees we have this evening. And I believe we have one more award that Brittany Cooper is going to provide. But it's been great being. I'm honored to have been part of this presentation this evening, to be with Al Davis and Judy Woosmart and everybody else. So thanks so much for this opportunity.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Ken. That was well said. I enjoyed working with you and everyone on this. The Sierra Club has a lot of very hardworking, determined members. That's why they get things done.
What a lineup tonight. Incredible stuff. Well, thanks to Ken Winston and Al Davis for your presentations. Well done, fellas. You have a good evening. And thank you once again. We're going to bring Brittany back on. Brittany Cooper in the house. Here she comes. All right, here she is.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, before I give out our last award, I wanted to remind everybody you have just over 15 minutes to get your bids in on those silent auction items. So yeah, get bidding. Well, congratulations, of course, to all of our awardees. We appreciate all your hard work. I have the distinct honor of introducing our final awardee, David Corbin. David has been a member of the Sierra Club for many years. He became more involved in the leadership and advocacy with the chapter after he retired from teaching at UNO in 2011. He has held the following positions with the chapter: Energy Chair, Legislative Chair, Vice Chair, and Chairperson. David has provided constant input supporting clean energy with OPPD since 2011, attending almost every meeting since then. He's been a leader in efforts to ban single-use plastic bags and has made numerous appearances as the bag monster at public events. David consistently reminds policymakers of the need to consider the public health impacts of their decisions, particularly the health impacts of climate change. He's currently the chair of our energy and legislative committees at the chapter and is engaged in education and outreach related to AltEn. And just welcome, David. Congratulations on this award, and thank you for all of your years of hard work for the club.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the people that went before. It was a great presentation, and I'm honored to be selected. It was a surprise to me on this Veterans Day. Should point out our veteran niece, and to all the other veterans, including my dad and my oldest brother. I want to wish Clyde Anderson well, because the Sierra Club is very dependent on all that he does for the Sierra Club. And I want to thank the executive committee and other Sierra Club members, and those names of the people that you heard and the other awardees with whom I'm honored to be in their company. And I want to just paraphrase John F. Kennedy when he was talking about the goal to get to the moon, but I'm going to change that a little bit, but use some of his words. We choose environmental and climate change issues not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one in which we intend to win. So I thank you.
Well, thank you, David. That was a great quote. I like how you changed it. I think that kind of wraps up our award ceremony. So I'll turn it back over to Mike, and thank you everyone for your participation, and remember to get to bidding.
Thanks, Brittany. Great job. Great job. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, everybody, moving the program right along. We got a couple more things here. Roger Garcia is a Sierra Club member and recent appointee to the D1 Douglas County Board of Commissioners. He will speak about his involvement with the Sierra Club PAC and some of the impacts of Sierra Club work that he has witnessed. So let's get his video here.
Hello, Sierra Club members. This is Commissioner Roger Garcia, District 1, South Omaha and downtown. Just wanted to give you a brief message to say how much I appreciate the Sierra Club in Nebraska, including the PAC, which endorsed me for my original campaign in 2020, and also supported me throughout the the appointment process that recently happened here in 2021 for the vacancy in District 1. So I believe that both are really important to supporting my cause and my effort to become a commissioner. Both are greatly appreciated and really helped me achieve that win after working hard for it, both through the campaign and the appointment process. So the activities that Sierra does are incredibly important, of course, to our push for more environmental sustainability policies at all levels of government, and to have elected officials that are on board with those green policies that are so dear to us and to the environment, of course. So keep going strong with everything that you do. I was personally involved as a part of the PAC last year and saw firsthand how we have a very intricate endorsement process where we looked at all candidates in local governments and really vetted all of them in depth. So it's really complicated work, but important work, because it led to a lot of good victories and a lot of our candidates actually getting into office. So appreciate all that you do, and I look forward to working with you on an ongoing basis. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Okay, all right. So, all right, we're going to get the next one pulled up here. We got Sharon Clausen. Sharon Clausen, let me get this pulled up for you guys. Okay. So Sharon Clausen is a longtime Sierra Club member and currently the chair of Nebraska Sierra Club Political Action Committee. She will speak now about how the PAC is structured and how you can become involved. All right, get this going for you.
Hi, my name is Sharon Clausen, and I'm the chairperson of the Nebraska Sierra Club Political Action Committee. We have 3 interlinked, active, cooperating committees. We have the Chapter Political Action Committee, or PAC, which handles national, statewide, and legislative races. We have the Missouri Valley PAC, which handles citywide elections. And we have the Blue Stem PAC. They handle the Lincoln local races. The 2022 elections may be the most challenging we've seen in a while. There are early indications of harmful social justice issues at our statewide elections. When negative emotions are out there at the top level, these negative sentiments can be expected to embolden candidates far down the ballot. And these candidates can be expected to oppose any legislation to fight climate change while promoting their own anti-social justice agendas. We need to begin preparing now for next year's fights. Most of all, we need to recruit, train, and coordinate volunteers. Sierra Club is all about volunteering. Generally, that's why most people join Sierra Club. And the first objective our PACs will have is to reach out and convince some of our members to join and help us in this work. We need your help first in researching the many candidates, and then we come together and discuss which candidates to endorse for the primary and the general elections. After that, we need to target which races we could have the most impact on. The Political Action Committee members who are voting members of the PAC will learn the Sierra Club rules and regulations, and those doing active campaigning will learn Sierra Club software tools. This work can be rewarding when we review some of our past victories. Please be watching for our emails to solicit your help, and please, please help us. The Sierra Club is unique in that we can make a difference in electing environmentally friendly candidates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. All right, so I'm going to invite Brittany Cooper back on. I just want to say thank you to the Sierra Club of Nebraska for having me tonight. My name is Mike Semrod with Red Rebel Media, and this has been an absolute joy. Everybody, have a good evening. Here's Brittany.
Well, hi, everyone. That closes our program for the evening. I hope you enjoyed it. And just thank you for participating in our event this year. Of course, a big thank you to Mike and Red Rebel Media for hosting our event. But I also want to thank all of our members and supporters directly. You really make it possible for us to celebrate our victories and meet the new challenges we face. The Nebraska Sierra Club is committed to making a healthier future for the next generations, but we need your help to continue combating climate change. Please take a minute, send a check, make an online donation, or you still have time to get some bids in on our silent auction. And remember, all your donations really are going to make the world a better place. Thank you and good evening.